Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about endgame upgrades for the Toxic Rain Ballista Pathfinder. In case you guys don't know, this is going to be my league starter for 3.21, and a lot of people have been asking, okay, so you outlined around about 10 divine budget, from 0 to 10 divine kinda. That's cool, but what after? And the question I got a lot, and the stigma that Toxic Rain definitely has, is that it falls off in endgame. The thing is, that is true, but people overestimate when it starts falling off. It's just about clever itemization. However, and I will say that right now, if you're somebody who just wants to play one build, right, for the whole league, and you want to pump hundreds of divines into it, this is probably not going to be the build for you. However, since we're not champion anymore, but Pathfinder, you're just an ascendancy respec away from some of the biggest juicer builds in the game, like, for example, Tornado Shot or Lightning Arrow. And those builds are incredibly good at converting your currency into power. However, I don't want to make it sound like Toxic Rain just falls off immediately after 10 divines. I would say up to 100 divines, Toxic Rain is actually really nice to upgrade, and I will go through all the upgrades with you. That is kind of where I set the mark. Now, I want to mention this. I cannot predict how much these items will cost. I've mostly taken data from PoE Ninja and PoE Antiquary into account from the last few leagues, so this is just an approximation, but I just want to show you what you can do to get the build to the next level, should you choose so. Now, a lot of the upgrades you won't actually see up front in the item section because they are gems. There is 4 gems, I think, in total, in particular, actually 5. First up, I put the Toxic Rain to level 21. Now, usually you could put 21s in your league starter, right? But 21 zeros, believable. 21 20s, that's more something for endgame because that's a little bit harder to acquire. So getting Toxic Rain to level 21, super strong. And then there's also Empower. As you can see right here, since we now have the +3 bow, Empower is actually extremely premium. And this is a level 4 Empower. So this alone gives you 60% more damage. Small note here, because we're not using life tap in the endgame version anymore, mana cost could be an issue depending on how much unreserved mana you're going to have exactly. We're actually working with this mastery right here. Skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. So this should alleviate a lot of the problem, and all the life cost doesn't do anything because we're regenerating thousands of lives per second. But I'm just saying this might be an issue you have to address. Now, other than that, we have Awakened Vicious Projectiles, just more damage than the normal version. And Awakened Void Manipulation is one of the first upgrades you should get. It not only gives you more damage, but it also gives you +1. And talking about gems, we also have in our aura setup right here, and Enlighten. So this Enlighten, together with the Helm enchant right here from the Wilma's Requital, makes it so we don't need the small cluster jewel anymore, which saves us 3 points, as well as it gives us another jewel slot. So yeah, I put the Enlighten at 10 divines, the Empower 4 at 10 divines, the Awakened gems at 5 divines total, the Helm enchant, Wilma's, I put it at 5 divines. This might sound high, but the thing is, even if you already have a Wilma's, you're probably going to have to give it to a lab runner to get that, unless they accidentally list exactly that, right? There's a +2 Emmy with dot multi. On a normal build, I have a +1 with dot multi. In this case, we have this version right here. This will basically just mean that you will lose a small life roll for another +1, which isn't that big of a deal. We actually have a lot more life and a lot more survivability in this version, of course. So this is also a investment. This could run you round about 15 divines. Now, another thing that you could explore is actually Ashes of the Stars. Maybe the increased reservation is actually going to be helpful here, enough to a point where this is feasible. One thing you have to be careful of, though, is you have to still be on 39% AoE, and if you have Toxic Rain and it has AoE quality, you will have too much. You will overshoot the 39%. So just make sure that you kind of figure that one out in case you want to go for Ashes of the Stars. Then we have the Watcher's Eye. The Watcher's Eye I had in my mid-game build only had Vitality Flask regeneration right here, increased Flask recovery, right? And this one also has a second mod. In this case, I took damage over time while affected by Malevolence. But there is a lot of other good ones. You can look through them right here. In particular, something like Unaffected by Bleed or Unaffected by Poison can always be nice. Or something like Phasing would be extremely strong. Overall, it's just about getting a second mod that's kind of good on top of the Vitality mod. Then we have the Thicket Bow. Now, if you're unsure on how to craft this one, check out my +3 bow crafting guide. But all you need to know is that the bow is going to look something like this, and it's going to be a huge upgrade. And it's going to cost to craft around about 7 divines, and I put an extra 2 divine on because you will also have to 6-link. And on that note, since we're losing Quill Rain, we're losing a ton of projectile speed that will make the arrows less responsive. It might not be as fun to play. You definitely want to compensate for that on the Quiver. You can, for example, use essences to force force projectile speed on, and then just roll until you get good rolls. If you feel like the build has slowed down, definitely look into that. And on top of that, if you're just mapping, I will say that straight up, Rain might just be your best in slot, because whereas this deals a ton more damage, Rain is just so much more fun. If you decide to go for Rain and you want to stay with the fun route, you want to get +2 levels on your Lightning Coil and then put your main setup in your Lightning Coil instead. Then we have a Flask Stygian. This is usually pretty hard to craft. That's why I didn't put too many mods here. It's a 4 mod. Charges gain, Flask Effect duration. It doesn't have to be exactly those, and you can also craft the Flask Effect duration, but this would be a really good thing to get. Tier 1 life, and I think this is Tier 2 strength. I don't remember. It has catalysts for the strength. And as for the Abyssal Socket, what I personally have here and what I like to do on some Chaos builds is, for example, a Searching Eye Jewel like this, where you have enemies withered by you have -2% of all resistances, which is quite strong, and then 12% Chaos Res. The reason I have Chaos Res here is because it's a pretty premium stat, and this combination on top of life is not easy to craft, but usually what I do is I spam, I think Aberrant Fossils was it, until I get something like this. Doesn't have to be Tier 2 life. Something along those lines. If it can fill out some resistances, right, and it can complement the build, it's going to be fine. You're not going to get too much damage from this. And alternatively, if you need to, you can also always go for a heavy belt if you need that extra strength. Now let's go to one of the biggest upgrades, which is actually Progenesis. If you think I'm a pessimist because I'm putting Progenesis as 15 divines, and last league started was around about 5-ish, right, you'd be surprised. I think that the jig is up. I think everybody knows that Progenesis is just absolutely busted at this point, and it just fits perfectly into the Pathfinder universe, so a lot of people are going to use it, maybe even more than last league. At this point, you have to know, though, that this is basically, because Chaos was extremely high at this point, this is basically capping out somewhere at 15-ish divines, right? And I think that's going to start earlier soon this time around as well. That is definitely a big investment, but if you look at your max hit right here with and without Progenesis, it's quite insane. 25% of the damage you take gets converted into a damage over time, which means that all our region is basically going to completely alleviate it. And it's also Chaos Res, which is going to make it easier for you to cap your Chaos Res. So it's just overall an absolute god tier item. Other than that, I did some things like sneak in an attack speed roll here on the gloves, basically better gloves. You don't really need to upgrade the implicits here because we're hitting so much that enemies are always extinguished and always maimed. But if you want to, you can do it. I don't think I changed anything on the boots. Emmy, we already talked about. Rings are still just there to fill out your resistances. Now, one thing I will say, though, is on your rings, you can actually look into prismatic catalysts. If you don't need the attribute catalysts anymore, prismatic catalysts are usually a lot more expensive, but they will give you a ton of res endgame. So maybe you can skim out somewhere else and, for example, get this flask belt in and you're still capped. You can also get res on your jewel, stuff like that. Something else I changed was basically just put in 4-stat jewels. So I put in a mild chaos damage roll in here. Just so you know, the best roll would be damage with bows, but that would probably be a little bit overkill and a little bit too expensive. As for passive theory, the first thing you will see is that we don't have this small cluster jewel here anymore. It's not needed because we now get the reservation from Enlighten and Helm Enchant. That makes space for Shrieking Bolts here, a medium cluster that taunts enemies, which works on your totems. Just a ton of extra damage that we can kind of leverage here. And the other nodes are basically just get some life. Also, the pathing nodes here will make your strength a lot easier and get constitution. Just so people have a blueprint, I went all the way to level 100. And what I can tell you, if you are somebody who wants to get to level 100, is get your Progenesis as soon as possible. The chance that you die once you have this flask on a Pathfinder is incredibly low. Maybe something falls down on the ground and you're just AFK for 10 seconds or something and your life flask runs out. Sure, but under normal circumstances, it's going to be extremely tough. Another tip here is that you definitely should go to PoE Ninja and see what other people are doing. And you can type in Toxic Rain right here, right? This is obviously from last league, so there's not a lot of people. And you can see what they do, what ascendancy they run, what setup they have. Do they do something special, right? Let's click on it. Okay, I can exactly see the items. I can see the passive tree. I can see the setup. Maybe there's something you're missing. Maybe there's something I am missing. I don't know what the new league is exactly going to look like. There's going to be a lot of variables. So if you really care enough, definitely go and look at other people's builds. As for which one to prioritize first, that's going to basically depend on your budget, how the rest of your gear looks like, right? A lot of these just fill in the gaps. I would say if you want to get to level 100, Progenesis as soon as possible is going to be your best bet. I would say in terms of damage, something like Awakened Void Manipulation and getting it in power 4 first will be big, as well as that getting your Thicket Bow crafted. Once again, definitely try out if you actually like these kind of bows. Start with a cheaper +3 bow and see if you are fine with the playstyle, because a Quirain is a lot more comfortable. I already know that I'm most likely going to stick with Quirain for a while, at least while I'm mostly mapping. And I want to remind you again that if you choose Quirain, get +2 levels on your Lightning Coil. And as always, the details matter. Every single stat matters, even if you think it's not that big of a deal. 14% attack speed here, that little bit of a projectile speed over there. These all kind of like fit together for a bigger narrative. So I hope I could help you out with the end game a little bit more here. And everybody has a good league start. But since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.